This is Unit 6, Chapter 2, Lesson 1, and it's over estimation and percent of a number. So we're actually combining Lessons 1 and 2. It's only labeled Lesson 1, but Mr. Romanovich is going to go over Lessons 1 and 2 with you. Here he is.
Oh, hey. I'm surprised. So this is Lesson 1 and 2. So if you want a reference point, check out Chapter 2, Lesson 1, or Lesson 2, either of which can help you with half of this. So set up a ratio and you can figure out what proportion of this will work for you if you have a question and what proportion will not. Anyway, we're doing estimation and the percent of a number, and by the end of this you will be able to estimate and find the percent of a number, and do that for all three of these. Estimate the value of 79% of 489, estimate 151% of 70, estimate half a percent of 82, and then also solve those. A lot of this will be sort of review from 6th grade. In fact, since I teach 6th grade, I know it's review from 6th grade. So we're going to start with estimation with each of these problems, and then we're going to solve it at the end. And what we're seeing then is is our estimate reasonable compared to our actual solution. So for this, our initial problem is 32% of 80. And for me, what I always like to think of when I'm doing my mental math for estimation is I always like to think of things in terms of 10%. Because we know 10% is the same value as 0.1. And then 0.1 times anything, so 80 times 0.1 ends up being 8. So all that really happened is that all I've done is move the decimal place one spot. So for any number that you know, let's say the number is 115, 10% of 115 is 11.5. 10% of 32 is 3.2. 10% of 1,837 is 183.7. And in all of those things, I know they're 10% simply by moving that decimal place one space to the Larry, or left. There we go. So here, let's get back to our problem. We've got 32% of 80. I know 10% of 80 is 8. And since we're doing estimation, what we're going to find is 30% of 80. And in finding 30% of 80, if I know 10% is 8, 30% is 3 10%. So that means I need 3 eighths, which is 8 times 3. So 8 times 3 then is 24. And what we're finding is now 24 is our estimation. I should put my estimation symbol up here. 24 is approximately 32% of 80. Now, how close is that? Here's where we get the calculator. So to check our calculator, the thing you've got to remember is that this word of, there's two pieces to this. The word of indicates multiplication, and we have to turn the percent into a decimal. To turn a percent into a decimal, we move the decimal place twice to the left, leaving us 0.32. And this is exactly what you go in your calculator with. We have 0.32 times 80 equals 25.6. 25.6 and 24, very close, not exact because we were estimating at first, but our reasonable guess is verified with an answer that is almost there, but not exactly there. So let's try this example. Here we have 68% of 42. So what we're going to find is, we're looking for an estimate of this, so we'll rewrite this with some numbers that we've rounded. 70% of 40. Now, for me and for you, what's 10% of 40? That's pretty easy. If I just move this decimal place one spot to the left, I find out that 10% of 40 is 4. How many 10% do I need? I need 7 of them. So 7 10% times 4 equals 28. So what we find is that 28 is about equal to 68% of 42. Now let's do it with the calculator. As we would write this in the calculator, we have 68% of 42. Translate this into our math gwidge. We convert 68% to a decimal, which gives us 0.68. Of becomes multiplication, and the 42 is a constant, and that just stays 42. And then we hit clear, and 0.68 times 42, or 68 hundredths, as Ms. Benoit would like you to say, is 28.56. Our estimation up here was 28. Our value that we found, 28 and 56 hundredths, or 28.56. That's really close. Reasonable estimation, accurate answer, very similar. We're doing the problem right. Let's look at one more example. Holy moly, look at that. 179% of 27. Okay, for something over 100, what we're going to know immediately is, let's break that into two parts. So let's break it into, for our estimation, 180%. We'll bump that 79 up to an 80. So 100% is the equivalent of 1.0. And what's 1 times any number? It's that number. So 27, let's make 27 into 30. So we're finding 180% of 30. So 100% of 30 would be the same as 30 times 1. So that 100% we're going to say right off the bat is 30. That leaves us this 80% left. So we figured out the 100%. Now let's find out what the 80% is, and what we'll do is we'll add them together at the end. So that 30 we can bring right down here to our addition point. So 10% of 30 is 3. And we find that because 30, we move the decimal place once, ends up being 3.0, or 3. How many 10% do we need? 8 of them. 8 times 3 is 24. So that's 80%. 10% is 3. 80% then becomes 24. And that leaves us 30 plus 24. Our 100%, and our 80%. Those then add up to 180%. And the value then is 54. And I should change my equal sign to the waves. So what we found is that 180% of 30, as an estimation, is about 54. Now, here we go. How do we do? We convert this into our math gwidge. We change this into a decimal. For this, we do the same process. 1, 2 with our decimal place. Goes there. 1.79 of becomes multiplication, 27. And let's figure out what it is exactly. 1.79 times 27 equals 48.33. 54 and 48.33. Pretty close. We've got a lot of moving parts here. We had to bump this up. We had to bump this up. So we ended up with a value that was slightly larger than what we got for the actual number. Now, can we hit the target? Can you estimate the value of each of these three? First estimate, then solve. And then compare the two. If they're close, you're on. If they're off, there's a piece that's missing. And your challenge is right here. We didn't talk about this, but give it a try. 0.5% of 82. What could that be? Good luck. If you have any questions, you can ask me or Mrs. Benoit. Check your book or rewatch this video. Thanks.